Welcome back to Hopeful Horizon, where we bring you stories that challenge the mind and stir the soul. Today's story takes a break from the heavy themes of social injustice and prejudice, diving into the complex world of respect and trust. This time, we follow a group of three military friends, fresh from a classified operation, as they walk into what they think will be a relaxing evening at a local bar. But when their military service is questioned and disrespected, what begins as a lighthearted evening turns into a confrontation they never saw coming. Stay with us as we explore the impact of doubting those who serve, the importance of loyalty among friends, and the consequences that arise when respect is thrown out the window. If you enjoy stories about unexpected twists and meaningful life lessons, be sure to subscribe to Hopeful Horizon and click the bell to never miss an episode. Let us know where you're listening from, and get ready for a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. The dim glow of the bar's neon lights contrasted sharply with the adrenaline rush still coursing through the veins of three men sitting in the corner booth. The night outside was calm, but inside, the air buzzed with the chatter of weekend revelers, a jukebox humming quietly in the background. "Man, I can't believe we finally pulled that off," said Corporal Jason Reed, stretching his arms behind his head and letting out a satisfied sigh. His two friends, Sergeant First Class Eric Wallace and Specialist Alex Carter, nodded in agreement. "Top secret, all right," Alex smirked, rubbing his hands together. "But now, we deserve this." Eric, the eldest of the group, a man in his late 30s with close-cropped hair and a rugged build, leaned back and scanned the bar. "Not exactly a five-star joint, but it'll do," he joked. The bar wasn't anything fancy, just a local dive with creaky floors and cheap beer, but to them, it was perfect. They had just returned from a classified mission, and after weeks of tense planning, all they wanted was to unwind. They flagged down the bartender, a scruffy man in his 40s with a permanent scowl etched on his face. He approached their table, slinging a dirty rag over his shoulder. "What can I get you guys?" The bartender grumbled. Jason leaned forward, grinning. "3 beers, please, and make it cold." As the bartender turned away, Jason reached into his wallet and pulled out his military ID, ready for whatever verification the bartender might require. They all knew the routine by now. Most places in town offered military discounts, and showing their IDs was standard procedure. Jason wasn't expecting any issues, but the moment the bartender glanced at the ID, his expression shifted from indifferent to suspicious. "This is fake," the bartender said flatly, tossing the ID back across the bar. Jason blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "You heard me," the bartender snapped, crossing his arms. "Fake ID. Nice try." Jason picked up his ID, his smile fading. "It's not fake, man. We're military. We just came back from an op." The bartender rolled his eyes. "Right. You expect me to believe that? People try this scam all the time. Flash some cheap ID, ask for a discount, then bail." Eric shifted in his seat, his calm demeanor starting to crack. "Look, we're not here to scam anyone. We're soldiers, and that's a valid military ID." "Uh-huh." The bartender leaned forward, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Well, guess what? I don't care what you're pretending to be. This ain't happening." Jason stood up, frustrated. "Come on, man. We're just trying to have a good night after weeks of busting our asses. Why would I lie about that?" The bartender sneered, grabbing Jason's ID off the counter and holding it up to the light as if examining it for further proof. Then, without warning, he reached for a pair of scissors behind the bar. "What are you?" Jason started, but the bartender interrupted him, slicing the ID in half and dropping the pieces into the trash. "Problem solved," the bartender said smugly. The three friends were stunned. Jason's hands clenched into fists, and Alex's face flushed with anger. Eric, always the level-headed one, tried to de-escalate. "There was no reason to do that," Eric said, keeping his voice steady. "That's a government-issued ID. You just destroyed federal property." The bartender shrugged. "Yeah, sure it was." Alex stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're going to regret this," he hissed, his temper flaring. "We weren't lying, and you're going to find out real soon." The bartender, clearly not backing down, stepped closer to the group. "Oh yeah? And what are you going to do, call in your military buddies?" He put air quotes around the word military, like it was a joke. Jason stepped forward, his voice low and threatening. You've got no idea who we are or what we've been through. But instead of backing off, the bartender smirked. I've got some buddies who fought in Afghanistan. Maybe I'll give them a call and have them come down here. They can teach you a lesson about what it means to be real soldiers. The air in the bar was tense. People started to take notice, a few customers watching the confrontation unfold from their tables. Jason wanted to punch the smug look off the bartender's face, but Eric placed a hand on his shoulder, pulling him back. Not worth it, Eric muttered. Damn right, it's not worth it, the bartender shot back. Get the hell out of my bar before I make that call. With no other choice, the three friends turned and left, their night ruined. But this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The walk back to their car was silent. Eric, Jason, and Alex each seethed in their own way, struggling to come to terms with what had just happened. Jason kicked the tire of their truck as they reached the parking lot. Can you believe that guy? Cutting up my damn ID? That was beyond disrespect, Alex growled. And threatening us with his buddies. He's lucky we didn't take him down right then and there. Eric, ever the voice of reason, spoke up. We'll get him back, but we're going to do this right. Tomorrow, we're bringing First Sergeant Daniels with us. A grin slowly spread across Jason's face. Oh, he's not going to see this coming. The drive back to the base was filled with a tense silence. The weight of what had happened sat heavy on their shoulders. As soldiers, they were used to dealing with difficult situations, but this wasn't the battlefield. This was their home, the place they defended. The fact that they had been disrespected in their own country by someone who likely hadn't seen a day of combat made it even worse. Eric's hands gripped the steering wheel as he maneuvered the truck through the quiet streets. The cool night air blew in through the windows, but it did little to cool the heat of the moment. Jason, sitting in the passenger seat, fumed silently while Alex shifted uncomfortably in the back seat, his knee bouncing up and down with agitation. I can't believe that prick, Alex muttered, breaking the silence. Cutting up your ID like that, who the hell does he think he is? Jason sighed deeply, running a hand through his short, cropped hair. It's one thing to not believe us, but to destroy a military ID, that's next-level disrespect. Eric kept his eyes on the road, but finally spoke, his voice measured. We'll get him, but like I said, we do this the right way. Alex scoffed. You really think he's going to care about First Sergeant Daniels? Guys like him don't respect authority unless it comes with a badge and a threat. That's the point, Eric replied, glancing at his friend through the rearview mirror. He's used to throwing his weight around in a bar where he thinks he's untouchable. Tomorrow, we'll show him just how wrong he is. Jason leaned back in his seat, the tension in his shoulders slowly easing. Daniels is going to eat him alive. This isn't some frat house prank. We're talking about federal property. He messed with the wrong guys. The rest of the drive was filled with talk of tomorrow's plan, a mix of anger and anticipation coloring their words. By the time they reached the base, all three men were set on what needed to happen. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about respect, something they had earned through years of service, and they weren't about to let some bartender strip that away. The next morning, they met up with First Sergeant Daniels in his office. Daniels, a towering man with salt and pepper hair and an air of authority, listened intently as they recounted the events from the night before. His expression grew darker with every detail, especially when Jason described the destruction of his ID. When they were finished, Daniels leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled together. So, let me get this straight. This guy not only accused you of faking your military ID, but he cut it up in front of you and then threatened to call his buddies to teach you a lesson? Jason nodded. That's exactly what happened, Top. He didn't believe a word we said. Daniels let out a low growl. Unbelievable. The nerve of some people. Alex, who had been silent for most of the meeting, finally spoke up. So, what are we going to do about it, Top? I mean, we could report this, right? That ID is federal property. Daniels stood, his imposing figure casting a shadow over the men. Damn right. We're going to report it. And more than that, we're going to pay this guy a visit. But I want to make sure we do this by the book. No getting physical unless we have to. We're soldiers, not thugs. Jason grinned. I'm all for doing it the right way, but I'm not going to lie. I wouldn't mind seeing the look on his face when you walk in." Daniels smirked. "Trust me, neither would I." The next evening, the three friends, along with First Sergeant Daniels, pulled up to the bar. The atmosphere was different now. This wasn't about having a good time anymore. It was about justice. The bar was crowded again, just like the night before, with the same bartender behind the counter. He didn't seem to notice them at first as they entered, but that changed the moment he saw Daniel's uniform. His cocky expression faltered for a brief second, but then he quickly covered it up with the same smug look from the night before. "Well, well, if it isn't the soldiers," the bartender sneered, eyeing the group. "Back for another round of make-believe?" Daniel stepped forward, towering over the bartender. His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the authority in his tone. "I'm First Sergeant Daniels, and these men are soldiers under my command. Last night, you destroyed federal property when you cut up a military ID." The bartender blinked, clearly caught off guard. He hadn't expected this. Look, I don't know what you guys are playing at, but..." Daniels cut him off. "This isn't a game. That ID was real, and you destroyed it. That's a federal offense. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to these men, and then you're going to hand over your name and information so we can file a report." The bartender's face turned red, not with anger, but with embarrassment. The crowd in the bar had gone quiet, watching the confrontation unfold. For the first time, the bartender seemed to realize he wasn't in control. I didn't know," he stammered. "I thought it was fake. People try to scam me all the time." "I don't care what you thought," Daniels said coldly. "These men have served their country, and you disrespected them. Now, you're going to face the consequences." The bartender looked around nervously, clearly unsure of what to do. "I didn't mean any harm. Can't we just forget about this?" Jason stepped forward, shaking his head. "It's not that simple, man. You crossed a line." Before the bartender could respond, the door to the bar swung open, and the manager walked in. He was a middle-aged man with a no-nonsense demeanor, and the moment he saw the military group standing at the counter, his expression shifted. "What's going on here?" the manager asked, approaching the bartender. "I got a call saying there was an issue last night." Daniel stepped back slightly to let the manager take in the situation. The bartender's face turned pale, and he quickly tried to explain. "These guys were here last night, claiming to be in the military. I didn't believe them, so I cut up the guy's ID. I thought it was fake." The manager's eyes widened. "You what?" I thought it was fake," the bartender stammered, his voice shrinking. The manager turned to Daniels and the soldiers, his face a mask of horror. "I am so sorry. I had no idea this happened. This is absolutely unacceptable." Daniels nodded, his tone firm. "You're right, it is, and there will be consequences." The manager's gaze hardened as he turned back to the bartender. "You're fired. Get your things and get out of here." The bartender's jaw dropped, but he didn't argue. He knew there was no point. Defeated, he muttered an apology and shuffled out of the bar. The crowd, who had been watching the scene unfold, began murmuring amongst themselves. Jason, Eric, and Alex exchanged satisfied looks. Justice had been served, and the man who had disrespected them had been put in his place. But more than that, they had made it clear that disrespecting a soldier's service was something that wouldn't be tolerated. As they left the bar, the manager approached them one last time. "I really am sorry about all of this," he said. "I'll make sure something like this never happens here again." Daniels gave a curt nod. "See that it doesn't. These men deserve respect, and so does their service." With that, they walked out into the night. The weight of the previous day's frustration lifted. They hadn't just stood up for themselves. They had stood up for all the men and women who wore the uniform. Thank you for joining us for another powerful story here on Hopeful Horizon. Today's tale was not about racial tension, but about respect. Respect for those who serve and the sacrifices they make. In a world where judgment is sometimes too quick and respect is too slow, it's stories like these that remind us all to take a step back and honor those who defend our freedoms. If this story moved you or reminded you of someone who serves, let us know in the comments. And as always, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss an inspiring story from Hopeful Horizon. We'd love to hear where you're tuning in from, so drop a comment below. Thank you, and until next time, stay hopeful.